Piper and Riley. Piper, Riley here.
Welcome everyone to the Advice Residency Post-Match Financial Education Seminar. I'm glad that you could make it to listen and learn, ask questions. And tonight we have 5 speakers after I finish a brief introduction. They're going to be talking about federal student loans, private loans, and credit card management, managing cash flow in residency, avoiding specific mistakes that are fairly common on the physician career track, as well as the benefits of establishing good money habits early on. So before we get into that, I just wanted to lay out the purpose of this, how it's going to work. Before I even do that, though, I wanted to mention that I think it's important that I share that I have 2 specific conflicts of interest, or COIs, relative to 2 of the panelists during this 3-day session. One is one of our speakers on Thursday. His name is Michael Relvis. He's a disability insurance agent. And then the other person is Dr. Zwade Marshall, who's going to be speaking today. With respect to both of them and ownership of companies that they own, I have a professional conflict of interest with them. So I wanted you to know that. However, neither they nor any of the speakers are going to be using their time to talk about any of their business or services. They want to share as much education as they can with you. They share that same interest that I do. And so that's going to be the focus so that you can really benefit from all this information, and that will be it. So what's going to happen is each of the speakers has approximately 20 minutes to speak, where they're going to share information with you. And you can post questions in the Q&A. There's a box for you to do that if you want to post a question that you'd like answered. They will speak for their time slot. And then when they're done, we have a breakout room that has been created so that that speaker can then go to that room. And then any of you who wish to ask further questions of them, you can go into that. You can move yourself over to the breakout room and then come back when you're done. So that way we just felt like it could be helpful if you have like clarifying questions that you wanted to ask. So that's the structure. The intention is for this to go from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern time tonight. And then we will have a new slate of discussion tomorrow. And then lastly on Thursday, again, from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern time. So use the same link, the same Zoom link that you used to get here today. I'm really glad that you all are here. And I know you could be using your time for many things. And so I really am eager, and I'm confident that it will be time well spent. So to get us started, we're going to be talking about federal student loans. And we're going to be speaking with Andrew Paulson. And Andrew is the co-founder and lead student consultant of studentloanadvice.com. And he's going to be discussing the topic, how to manage federal student loans, to put the plan, whether you're going for public service loan forgiveness or not, to put that plan on autopilot during training. So please take it away, Andrew.
Thanks, Tyler. All right. Okay. Let's go. We're starting with the most boring topic, student loans, but it's an important one for you out there. Okay. I've personally helped out lots of doctors, and my inspiration came because I'm married to medicine, and that's how I got into this. So what we're going to be talking about today is number one, how do these income-driven repayment programs work? Public service loan forgiveness, consolidation. And then our second piece today is student loan management for new grads. We'll go over a little case study, private refinancing, and just a couple of additional considerations. So let's jump in on income-driven repayment programs. I don't have to cover this much that we know most of you out there have loans anywhere from $200,000 to $240,000. And that was the average educational debt back in 2020. We know it's gone up since then. And $300,000 to $450,000 is becoming very, very common. And sometimes you're married to another doctor. Your partner's a doctor, right? So, and I see that all the time where it's pretty close to seven figures that you're starting with when you're just getting your first job as in residency. And just another quick note too is that the interest rates on these loans are probably somewhere in the 5 to 6.5, 7% range. And most recently, rates were going at 7 and 8% for these federal student loans. Let's talk about income-driven repayment. So there's 4 income-driven repayment programs. Okay. ICR, IBR, pay, and save. But the 2 that you really want to keep your eye on, income-based repayment and saving on a valuable education. What about pay and ICR? Those were pertinent repayment programs in the past, but they are phasing out effective July 1st. So when many of you are getting started with residency this year, you're really not going to be able to get into those payment programs. So we'll talk about the save and IBR. If you have federal student loans, please become an expert in these different payment programs and understand the nuances of each because it's important. So what about these income-driven repayment programs? Payments have nothing to do with your interest rate. And payments have almost nothing to do with the amount of student loans that you owe. They are based solely on your income and the number of people in your family. Let's suppose you're a resident and you're making $60,000 per year. You owe $250,000 in student loans at a 7% interest rate. If you were on a standard 10-year repayment plan, that is a monthly payment of almost $3,000 a month. If you were on a 25-year or the extended repayment plan, that is almost $1,800 a month. That's hard when you're making $4,000 or $5,000 a month as a resident, right? But let's look at the grid below that. And let's suppose you're single and you're looking at this first line here that has one person in your household size. How much would your payments be if you're on an income-driven repayment program? Start with the left and we'll move right. ICR is $750. New IBR and pay are the same. They're $300. And the SAVE program is just $200 a month. So the SAVE program in this situation is a difference of $2,700 a month. That is a huge, huge amount of money. Okay. And so while you're in residency, these income-driven repayment programs can be way more affordable. Let's say you're married and you have 2 children and you're the sole earner in your household. You can see at a household size of 4. If you go look down to the line 4 is 0. You could effectively have $0 payments in income-driven repayment while you're in training. Let's talk about SAVE. SAVE is the newest income-driven or IDR plan and usually the best for trainees. Payments are based off of 10% of discretionary income. So generally just whatever your take-home pay is. And so it's 10% for grad loans and it's 5% for undergrad. So it would be a mix of the two if you have both. There's a deduction before they calculate your payments. It's based on poverty line. It's the largest for the SAVE program. It's 225% of the poverty line. There are no cap on the payments and how high they can go in SAVE. 100% of the accumulating interest after monthly payment is forgiven. So effectively, it can help subsidize your interest rate. So let's suppose your interest is $1,000 a month and your monthly payment is $200. $800 of interest would be unpaid, and in this case would be waived. And I cannot highlight this enough. This is huge for those of you that are trying to keep your balance from going up while you're in training. It is much better than deferment or forbearance. And it allows you, if you are in a program that is eligible for public service loan forgiveness, to start on that track. Okay. Let's talk about the public service loan forgiveness program. This program was created back in 2007. So here we are, 17-ish years in now. There have been more than 750,000 borrowers that have had their loans discharged through this program as of last year. And I would assume that number is pretty darn close to 1 million borrowers as of now. Here we are in March. There are 4 requirements for public service loan forgiveness. Number 1, you need to be in an income-driven repayment program, ICR, IBR, Pay, or Save. You need to make 120 on-time monthly payments, working a minimum of 30 hours per week, and work for a non-for-profit or 501c3. There is an employment certification form that you will want to fill out each year if you're a candidate for public service loan forgiveness, and that can be found on studentaid.gov/PSLF. The loan balance that is discharged when you hit public service loan forgiveness is exempt from taxes. And most residencies and fellowships are 501c3s and qualify. Most academic positions as well qualify. But please be aware, there's a lot of positions out there for doctors that you're at the hospital, but you're actually employed by a private organization that contracts. In that case, most of the time it does not qualify for public service loan forgiveness. Also, some other options are the VA, military, CHC's public health. Those are some other organizations out there that qualify. So the opportunity for jobs in public service is quite expansive. So why does PSLF work? Well, number 1, it gives you very affordable payments when you're in training, far less than what they could be if you were on a standard, or the extended repayment program. And generally, the amount that you're forgiven when you hit your decade of payments is about what you started with when you graduated from medical school. PSLF is usually the best option to pay down your loans if you qualify. But hold on so fast, Andrew. What about the legislative risk? If you're worried about public service loan forgiveness going away, you can set aside a PSLF side fund. And this is effectively setting aside money that you would have been putting into the student loans had you been on a standard repayment schedule, and perhaps you're saving that in, some type of savings account, perhaps for a rainy day. And there's also some career risk. Maybe you don't end up in public service. Maybe you go into private practice after training, right? But that can help offset the difference if there were legislative challenges or if you decided not to work in public service after training. Okay, direct federal consolidation. This is crucial for those of you out there that are graduating here this May and June. A consolidation allows you to take federal loans and lump them into 1 or 2 loans. It makes FFEL or Family Federal Education loans and Perkins loans eligible for public service loan forgiveness and also eligible for the latest and greatest income-driven repayment programs. For those of you that are graduating right now, you may not have these FFEL, but some of you may have some of these. So if you have those, you definitely want to look into consolidating them. And if you do have previous payment history before you started medical school, they will take that into account, but they're going to take a weighted average. So if you didn't borrow much for medical school, not going to change a whole lot in terms of your candidacy for loan forgiveness. But if you had a lot of loans before you started medical school, maybe you did another graduate program before you started med school and worked for a fair amount of time, by virtue of consolidating, that can help bring your payments above 0. And perhaps you might have a couple of years getting started when you begin residency. Interest capitalizes when you consolidate. So that means effectively that the principal balance of your loan is going to increase, and inevitably it's really something you can't get rid of. It slightly raises your interest rate. They take a weighted average of the interest rate of your existing federal student loan. So if your interest rate's 7%, it'll go up to about 7.125. And a key point, and the number one reason why most interns should look at a direct federal consolidation, is it allows you to skip your grace period. Grace period is this leeway wherein you do not have to make payments generally for the first 6 months as an intern. If you are doing public service loan forgiveness, you do not want to use this grace period because that means your payments start in November or even December. You want that clock to start as soon as you begin residency in July or August at the latest. And what consolidation does is it allows you to shorten that grace period and start repayment as soon as you begin residency, but you can't consolidate until you graduate. Here is a visual representation of this doc's loans, owes about $220,000, a little bit from undergrad, majority from medical school, takes them and packages them together neatly into 2 loans. So not only does it allow you to start repayment immediately, but it's just a little bit easier to look at as well. But you can notice that the interest rate does slightly increase from, in this case, 6.94 to 7%. Okay, let's talk about student loan management, how to apply some of these concepts that we've talked about today. So I think it really boils down to 2 options. You're either going to pay these off, perhaps through private refinancing or some aggressive repayment schedule for most, or it's to pursue loan forgiveness. And in this case, most will do public service loan forgiveness. How do you decide? It really comes down to 2 big pieces: your debt to income and what type of employment you seek after training. Picture this. You owe $300,000 for medical school and your attending income is $300,000. That is a debt to income ratio of 1 to 1. If your debt to income ratio is 1 or lower, meaning you make more than you owe, that might be a situation where you want to refinance or pay them off aggressively and not do loan forgiveness. If your debt to income ratio is 1 to 1.5, you'll need to run the numbers on a standard or a refinance or public service loan forgiveness. And the longer you're training, generally, the better PSLF is, because most residencies and fellowships, are qualified for public service loan forgiveness. So if you're going to be in training for, you're a cardiologist and you're going to train for 8 years, well, heck, you may only have to work 2 years in academics to get there, to get your 10 years. And if your debt to income ratio is 1.5 or higher, you're most surely a very, very good fit for public service loan forgiveness. So, and I mean, alluding to the question that we had talked about earlier, what type of employment are you seeking after training? If you're looking at working in academia or nonprofit or VA, you're probably going to want to do PSLF because you'll end up most likely paying less to do that. Or if you're in private practice, at that point in time, you're most likely not going to be a candidate for public service loan forgiveness or really any other, forgiveness option, and should look at perhaps an aggressive pay down or private refinancing your student loans. But just note that you only want to do that if you're absolutely certain. Okay, let's go over a quick case study. You've got a single emergency medicine doctor who has residency for 3 years. While they're in residency, they're going to make about $65,000 per year. They enroll into the SAVE repayment program and they consolidate their loans right when they graduate from medical school. You can see that over the years, their intern year, they actually have $0 payments. And you could actually have $0 payments for 2 years in this case. Okay. And then you can see that over time, as they require you to certify income each year. So those payments would go up, and they're going to make about $300,000 as an attending. And so at that case, you can see their payments would get to about $2,200 per month. But over a decade, this emergency medicine doctor is going to end up paying about $130,000 for that 300 grand that they borrowed. Let's say that they decided on doing a standard 10-year repayment plan. And I know it's probably not feasible for this doctor to start paying $3,300 a month, but let's just suppose they are so we can try to get some type of apples to apples comparison here, looking at PSLF over 10 years and the standard 10-year over 10 years. On a standard 10-year loan at 6%, this doc is going to pay just shy of $400,000. Okay. And we're assuming, looking at this in a vacuum here, that they're going to make similar income with a public service job versus one in private practice, which I know can vary across specialties. Sometimes it's not as big of a difference as you'd think taking the public service job, but this is huge. We're talking about, this could save this doctor $270,000 after taxes in the first 10 years of their career. So if you're at least considering public service loan forgiveness, or if you're not even sure, just make sure you're getting started on this, because this can mean, a difference of a couple $100,000 for you. Okay. Private refinancing. Some resident, there's some resident refinancing programs out there that can allow for $0 to $100 monthly payments. This is an excellent option if you have private student loans. So if you had some private loans that you had to borrow, maybe during medical school or beforehand, this is a good option to look into that, because you might be able to lower your interest rate. But it is not advisable for you while you're in school and generally while you're in training. Okay. Because once loans are refinanced, you no longer qualify for federal programs such as income-driven repayment or public service loan forgiveness. So please be absolutely certain you don't want to do forgiveness or IDR when you decide on refinancing those federal loans. And you only want to do it if you can get a lower interest rate as well. Okay, let's talk a couple of other considerations. Number one, dual income couples should consider married filing separately on your taxes, because if you're married and your partner makes money, if you file jointly, their income can get considered when they are calculating your payments. If the objective is to keep payments as affordable as possible, you may want to file separately. Those who make more than they owe post-training should consider IBR and pay over save. That's because income-based repayment and the pay program have a payment cap, whereas the save program, sky is the limit. IBR and pay have a payment cap that is based on the standard 10-year amount, or really it's whatever your loan balance was when you first entered repayment. And it's based on whatever your loan size. It could be $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. But for those of you going into potentially higher earning specialties and are going to make significantly more than you owe in student loans, you may want to look at pay or IBR that caps your payments. Filing an extension on taxes can allow you to keep your payments lower for longer, because what this does is it allows you to delay income up to 2 years. And when you file an extension on your taxes, it postpones your filing date from April to October. So as an example, think about next year, next summer. Let's say it's July 2025 and you're up for income certification for the first time since you did it this year after, during your consolidation. Well, you can file an extension on your taxes so that you file your 2024 taxes, what you make this year, in October next year. And by virtue of doing that, you can use your 2023 taxes next year in 2025, effectively allowing you to use the lower income. And you could do that each subsequent year while you're in training. Contributing to pre-tax accounts such as a 403B, 457 deferred compensation, or a 401k, if your program offers that, can also help to lower your adjusted gross income. Okay. And that's all I've got for today.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I really appreciate the the breadth of information you shared. Now, you can continue to post questions in the Q&A relative to what Andrew shared, but you're also welcome to go into the breakout room. There's if you click on breakout room link at the bottom of your screen, there's a room that says Andrew Paulson's breakout room. You can join there if you wish. He's going to go over there now so that if anyone has additional questions that you'd like to ask, you can do so. And then when you're, when you want to come back to the, to the main session here, you can do so. Thank you so much, Andrew. Really appreciate what you had to share.
Thanks, Tyler.
So, all right, our next speaker is Dr. Zwade Marshall. He's the CEO and co-founder of Doc-to-Doc Lending, as well as a board-certified anesthesiologist. He's going to be discussing the topic, how to manage private and credit card debt to promote stability during your training years. Dr. Marshall?
Thank you so much, Tyler. Can we unshare Andrew's presentation so I can load mine, please? Perfect. And let me ensure you guys can see me. Excellent. All right. Audio is good. You guys can see and hear. Perfect. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for being a part of this seminar, and a special kudos to each of you for staying and caring about your financial health during this exciting time, but it's also a challenging and nerve-wracking time. As Tyler said, I'm Dr. Zwade Marshall. I am a practicing anesthesiologist and spine specialist, and I'm also the CEO of Doc-to-Doc Lending. And I'm thrilled to be here to offer some guidance, tips, tricks to understand how to manage private and credit card debt as you're transitioning from medical school to residency. I'll talk for about 15 minutes, and then I'll be in the breakout room to answer questions that you guys may have. Note the QR code on the bottom, the right side will lead you to our Match Day Toolkit, where you'll find several helpful resources on budgeting, relocation expense trackers, and the like. Quick disclosure, I only have 2 licenses, one to practice medicine and the other to drive. So do not construe this as financial advice. I'll leave that to Tyler. It's just guidance from someone who's walked in your shoes. We've got this cool kind of interactive widget here that I'd love for you guys to play with, play along with me. Scan the QR code. I'm curious to know how you all feel about matching and going after residency. Is this a time of anxiety? Are you thrilled, nervous? You'll be able to put responses, and I'll give you about 15 seconds to see where the room is. Excellent. All right. So it's working. Very good. So we see nervous, excited, good and bad, stoked, ready. Fantastic. And as we get through this evening and tomorrow's presentations, the goal is to help you feel a lot more at ease with what to expect, especially as it pertains to your fiscal health. Now, I'll tell you in brief, 13 years ago, I was in your shoes. I was 26 years old. I was an Emory medical student, was thrilled on match day to find out that I was going to be doing my anesthesia residency at Harvard. And quickly recognized, though, that I needed to borrow about $17,000 at that time to go from medical school in Atlanta, a relatively low cost of living city, to Harvard for residency in Boston, which is one of the highest rental markets in the country. At that time, I had poor credit, less than a 700 FICO score, not because of bad behavior, but just because of the toll that all that student loan debt took on my credit profile, because I had $220,000 student loan debt at the time. And my income as a first-year intern at Harvard was going to be equivalent of $13.15 per hour, so $54,000 a year. And the banks saw me as a high-risk borrower, so they either denied my loan application or they gave me a credit card interest rate, and it felt unfair. And so that led me and my co-founder, another resident that I met at my residency, to start Doc Lending, where we have physicians that provide capital to help other doctors lend. We are going to talk this evening, though, about the 6 ways to build wealth faster, and that includes how to manage private and credit card debt. And I'll really focus on the 6 mistakes that we see amongst the over 7,000 doctors who've applied for loans from us over the course of the past 4 years. And we want to kind of break the cycle of mistakes that lead to bad credit profiles from physicians. Now, so the first thing is you're likely not increasing your credit score. And in truth, you're probably not even thinking about it because you didn't have to. The most significant loans that you've probably had at this point in your life are student loans, and that does not necessarily require you to have great credit. So know this, there are often mistakes in your credit report that may be hurting your score. So it's important to check it at some regular frequency, and know checking your credit profile approximately once a quarter does not hurt your overall credit score. And so it's important that you use a free credit monitoring service just about quarterly to keep an eye on what's going on. You may have an old cell phone bill from when you were in college that you owe $60 on that's being reported as collections. That's hurting your score. And if you just knew about it, you can clean it up. I want you to keep older accounts open and avoid closing accounts, because it's better, for instance, to pay off a credit card and keep it open rather than paying it off and closing it. What matters most from a credit profile perspective is your debt utilization. So for example, let's say you have 2 credit cards, each with a limit of $5,000. Combined, you're allowed $10,000 worth of credit limit. And let's assume that you're currently maxed out. You've spent $10,000 on those 2 cards combined. That's 100% credit utilization. But then you borrow $5,000 from Dr. Da to pay off one of those cards. If you paid that card off and closed it, you now only have $5,000 of credit limit available to you, and you're still using $5,000 on that card that's open. So you've not improved your situation. If you paid off the one card and kept it open, you retain $10,000 in limit, and you're now only utilizing $5,000. So your overall credit utilization is 50%, and that will lead to a dramatic increase in your credit score. Make on-time payments and utilize auto pay when you can, even if it's for a small amount that you're certain you can afford, and you can add overpayments over the course of the month if you have extra cash. And to really try to avoid being late, because late payments will always hurt your score for delinquencies. Now, you're probably not budgeting because it's hard to do so when you make very little, but I want you to think about your expenses monthly and then reverse engineer what that looks like on a weekly or daily basis. So you have a good sense on whether or not you should order that 3rd margarita while at dinner with your friends. And you can go to our budget planner tool to start with a template that we provide to show you for ease of use on how to put together a simple budget based upon some of the most common expenses that interns will have over the course of their first year in residency. I want you to prioritize and place emphasis on the things that are impactful to your financial health. We all love acronyms in medicine, so let's call this one DIRE, D-I-R-E, for debt reduction, insurance, retirement, and emergency. On the debt side, that's the number 2 reason why members come to us to borrow, to pay down credit card debt that they've incurred while in medical school. Number 1 actually is for relocation expenses. Most of you should have med-mal and disability insurance covered by your residency programs. There may be a few community-based hospitals that don't cover disability, but as you progress in training, especially as you're approaching your final year, look into thinking about own occupation, specialty-specific insurance policies that will allow you to have the maximum payout if you're no longer able to practice in your specific specialty. even if you can practice general medicine. Start saving for retirement early and treat it in a very disciplined manner. Consider putting aside approximately 15%, 15% of your monthly income, and take it out of your paycheck first. So pay yourself before you pay other bills. And if you start a retirement saving at the age of 25, for example, you're going to have almost double the amount of money at the age of 65 compared to someone who started at 35 years old. So that 10-year head start gives you twice as much capital with just consistent savings. So think about that thoughtfully as well. And finally, target having about 3 months worth of your salary as an emergency fund, stored in an easily accessible, fairly liquid account. Another quick engagement question here. Take your time and let me know if you have done a check of your credit score in less than a year, more than a year, or in some time period that's similar there. Wow. Excellent. Good. So many of you are already doing this, and that's fantastic. Keep it up. The point here I'm driving home is that you should be familiar with exactly what's on your credit report. The score matters a lot, but the details matter more. And anything that you can improve, that's impaired, that you have control over, you should. Automate everything that you can. You will often get an interest rate discount for automating payments because your lender wants you to make payments on time. But it also helps with those priority items on the previous slide, the dire slide, right? So for instance, automate payments to yourself. Have that 15% of your towards savings come out of your check at the very beginning after your pay gets approved. And then you can automate essentials like insurance and rental payments so that you'll never be late. And that will also force you to budget because you can't auto draft or auto pay expenses that you've not thought about as being within your realm of affordability. And you can add that quarterly credit report check and the payments for that if it's going to cost you a fee to that process as well. Your hospitals will often have a benefits page for employees that will offer all kinds of discounts and special savings. You may get cell phone discounts from using a preferred provider or a company there, grocery store savings. Your credit cards have similar deals as well. Use them. Utilize free resources from mentors and credible influencers. Join physician wellness communities online, but be careful to ensure that you're filtering for the credible ones only. And consider tools like Wally and Honeydew and MintZip and our Match Day Toolkit as places to go to have some template to begin to work off of. Borrow responsibly. It's kind of counterintuitive, but in order to build credit, the lenders need to know that you've been able to use credit and use it well. So consider getting a credit card if you don't currently have one, but pay it off monthly. You want to only make charges that you can afford to pay off at the end of the month, and you can use it to help you with your budgeting tool as well. And this will help to build your score over time. If you already have credit card debt, and many of you do, consider having a personal loan to consolidate that debt. And if you already charge too much, because you'll save money on the high interest on those credit card APRs, but it also helps with your credit utilization score and overall bumps your overall profile. Finally, you can visit us and take a look at our Match Day Toolkit. We have some giveaways for all of you residents and incoming interns to be helpful to your journey. And here's our contact info. You can reach me at the QR code on the left and on our Match Day platform on the right side. That's it. Thank you for your attention, and I will be in the breakout room coming up in a moment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marshall. Appreciate your efforts and information that you shared. So yes, as he just mentioned, if you have further questions of Dr. Marshall, there's a breakout room that you can go to just by clicking the breakout room icon at the bottom of your screen, and there's a breakout room labeled Dr. Marshall. And now good friend and excellent financial planner. Valerie Rivera is going to be speaking next. She's going to be discussing how to manage cash flow during residency. Valerie, please, we're looking forward to it.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. You could have been anywhere, right? You could have been watching the Love is Blind reunion, but yet here you are, so thank you. I'm going to be talking about setting up your goals and spending plan, and I feel like the doctor just set me up for this next phase because so much of what he said I'm going to be talking about, and it's that next step in this, so thank you. All right, the first piece is I'm going to share my screen and I will go over a couple of slides and then we're going to head into a real life example. So setting up your spending plan. The first thing I want to note, not to be overly woo-woo about things, but money is a very personal and sensitive topic, right? Whether it is with family or with yourself or with the media, I want you to question all of the shoulds. We read articles about these are the things you should be doing by 30 or you should be doing by 40. So just always keep that in the back of your mind in terms of what should I be doing, because you should be following what is best for your situation and only know your situation best. The second piece is this is a no shame and no judgment zone. So anything goes here. There are no stupid questions. That does not exist. And then the third part is our financial life is not separate from the rest of our life. For some reason, we've been trained to think that these are money questions, but money is intertwined with so many decisions we make in life, whether we want to accept it or not. So intertwined. All right, here's a real life story about my friend Yesenia. Yesenia is a real person. I changed her name, and this connects to her money and her spending plan. So Yesenia is a surgeon. She is first generation college student, first generation Latina. She is the head of breast cancer surgery at a major hospital in Chicago. She's about 5 feet tall. So think about that in terms of just the stuff she had to face going through residency and being a surgeon and all the isms, right, that come along with it. So I asked her when she was in residency what it was like and what it meant in terms of cash. So I'm going to show a screenshot of the text message that we exchanged today. So this is an excerpt from it about managing while you're broke. How much did you make as a resident roughly? And she said, I live with 2 roommates and shopped at Aldi. You're in the hospital for most of the time, so I ate cafeteria food. Night shift, we would order as a group and sometimes the attending would pay. You live in scrubs most of the time, so you don't spend too much on outfits. I had a used car. And my response, I didn't know I was including this today, but I said, I live in sweats and shop at Aldi. I live like a resident. Did you have any money for fun or to save? Since you work so much, you barely have fun. So you all have a lot of fun stuff coming your way. She said, so there's reserve for fun. So I wanted to set this up for you as we go through this next piece, which is to know where you're going, we have to look at where things stand right now. I'm going to share a different screen. We're going to go to Excel. Excel's not the coolest, I understand, but I want to show you Yesenia's real life example of what it looked like to set up a spending plan and how you can automate along the way. So I am going to exit this. I'll be fudging this along the way. So we can tell me, Tyler, if when I pull this up, if we can see the Excel that I have up here now.
Yep, I can see it right now. It looks like it's expanding. Yeah, we can see the 2024 template spending worksheet and monthly cash flow.
Here is step 1. Now, you can use an app. There's different types of apps out there in terms of figuring out spending. Something that I have seen in real life in my practice working with people is if you make $60,000 or if you make $600,000, it doesn't actually matter if you're spending more than what you're making. So I have had people who make $600,000, but they're spending $650,000. Putting together a spending plan is not for people who don't have a lot of money. It is for everyone. So the first step is putting down what you are actually making on a monthly basis after taxes and after deductions. You're going to see a lot of guidelines online that talk about your numbers from a gross perspective. That's before taxes. I don't like looking at those because we don't live in a gross numbers world, right? We pay taxes. So I like to look at numbers based on what are we actually paying and what are we actually receiving. So I'm making the assumption that you are a resident and you're making the average of $67,400. There is a 3% match at your work. And so you're taking the match only, and your net pay is $38.30. Now I base this off of one person. If there's a second person, by all means, put this in. If there's rental income, that's lovely. Factor that in as well. But I'm going off of Yesenia's real life. So for Yesenia, she had $1,200 in rent because she had 2 roommates, $10 in renter's insurance, out-of-pocket medical cost, right? So it goes down the line of what her needs are. And this is how we have it divided up. Now, when you're going through this, I want you to think about what your needs are, and they can be different, right? An example is some people might say, well, therapy is a want. And for others, like, no, that's an absolute need for my mental health. So think about your list of your personal needs. And then we go down to the want section. So the want section is, if budget is tight, what can you adjust? So I have here, right, just a good assumption of what I see in real life is your dining and your takeout's going to be higher. Are you going to actually have time to cook? Let's be realistic about what is being spent. And then breaking it down so that you have money for self-care and you have money to do things that you enjoy in life. So update this along the way in terms of understanding what is actually being spent on a regular basis, and not what you want it to be, but what is happening. So one way to do this is, let's say you have a free credit card, right? It's a free credit card that doesn't have an annual fee, and you're building up your credit score along the way. You're putting as much purchases as you can on the credit card, but then you're paying the credit card off in full every month. This way you are building up your credit score along the way. But something that I tend to see is when you have a credit card, it can be easy to essentially borrow from yourself and lose how much you actually have. So having this framework of, on an average month, I spend, and I'll scroll down here, $33.62. So on an average month, I'm spending $33.62. That's your baseline number. Most people know what they make, but if you ask them what they spend on a monthly basis, they probably don't know, right? And that number is really key, because then that's going to tell you how much you have left over to figure out the automation for your next steps. So here's what I did next. Right, there's a big question in terms of, I want to build an emergency fund. I don't know how to build one in terms of how much do I prepare for it. We want to think about this in terms of risk. So are you in a dual income household? Well, then there's lower risk, right, of 2 people losing their role versus someone that's a single household. We want to think about what your sleep at night number is along the way. So I put down for Yesenia's case, just looking at a 4-month and looking at a 6-month, because she might feel more comfortable with a 6-month, or she might say, you know what, let's just go in the middle between these 2 numbers. But for her, I wouldn't go below 4 months. And then we know from this how much we're actually looking to build toward, right? Because when people build emergency funds, do they actually know what they're building toward? And what I tend to see in real life is that, right, if you're a good saver, it can be easier to auto save into a cash account, but then you keep saving, you keep saving, you keep saving. You wouldn't believe how many kind of first generation wealth builders I work with who have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in cash, right? I know that's not your situation at this present moment, right? Likely for the most of you, but one day when you are making serious money, it could be really easy to see that buildup happen of having just a lot of cash. So if you know that you're working toward a specific number and your number is going to change as your expenses change, then you can say, I have this goal and build toward that goal. You also don't have to build one goal and then move on to the next. You can build concurrent goals at the same time, all right? So now that we know the expenses, 3362, and then we have your income afterward, 468. Now we're going to go to that next step that the doctor mentioned, which is mapping out cash flow. Okay, so here's step one. Step one is line 6. Line 6 is your income every single month, right? So your income is going to stay consistent throughout the month. If something changes, you received a gift from someone, from a family member, plug it in. Okay, but this is income. Line 10 is your current bank balance. So I'm making the assumption, right, where let's say we're in January and the current bank checking balance is $2,500. Now, line 14, we are mapping out what the goals are along the way, and then we're going to automate them. The plan is not to live in Excel. We want to use this as a framework, automate it, and then go live your life. So we know that your monthly spending is averaging $33.62. Now, the emergency fund contribution, we decided the goal is $15,000. Yesenia already had $5,500. She used that as seed money. So what we did was she has her bank account. That's where all of her transactions, right? Any debit transactions are going through there. Her spending, anything else is going on the credit card. She's paying off the credit card in full every month. So that, right, she's getting the points, she's building up her credit score, she's showing that the on-time payments every month, that's going to help in terms of favorable lending rates later. And then for her emergency fund, she has an online savings account. So Ally is my favorite online savings account because you can have one overarching account, and they have something called a bucketing system where within one account, you can have sub goals and automate into sub goals. So I recommend having a goal for emergency fund, a goal if you have any other kind of specific short-term need happening. The other really big goal is for vacation, because eventually, right, you'll take a vacation one day, and right, you'll need to rest, you'll need to rejuvenate, right? Think about vacation not as it's not a privilege to take a vacation, right? It's a requirement for you to be able to be your best, assuming you like that. So with vacation, that is one area where it tends to be bigger spending, but very lumpy. So what I love for vacation is to create your own vacation bucket within Ally. And so here's something I have everyone do, and I recommend you do this too. I'm sending out the spreadsheet at the end of things, is looking at the year to see what is happening for the year. So I made this up, right? A weekend in Michigan, you're going to go in August. It's 3 nights. You'll be driving there. Here is the hotel and the vacation. There's no special attire, spending and eating money, right? This is the total amount that you'll need for that trip. And then in November, a friend's getting married. You're going to Cabo, sharing a room, 4 nights. Here's the airfare. And you don't need to know specific numbers, but just a ballpark of things. I think this is helpful for 2 reasons. One is it helps you plan out your time ahead. right? Maybe you don't know where you're going, but you know at some point you're going to take a weekend away. If you don't go, it shouldn't be because of money, because you've been saving along the way. So in Yesenia's case, she knows realistically for 2024, it's going to be $2,500 that she'll be spending for the year. So knowing that, we're going to go back to the spending part here. We are going to go to line 16, vacation bucket, and we're going to make this an evergreen account, meaning putting in some initial amount of money, because you're not going to take all of your vacations at the end of the year necessarily, right? A vacation might be mid-year, so you might not have all of the money in time. So if you have some seed money to fund it, then you can say, okay, $500 is some seed money, and then you're going to auto contribute $200 every single month into your ally bucket. And by the end of the year, you'll have $2,900. So then when you take your vacation, right, let's say you first are going to purchase airfare. You purchase your airfare, it's on the credit card the following month. You move money from Ally, which takes 2 to 3 days, to your bank account. Now you can pay off that higher than normal credit card bill. That next round, you are going to pay for the hotel in that next space. Same thing, pay for the hotel, you put in your credit card, transfer the money, pay it off. And then that third piece of, you're on the trip, you have your spending money. When you come back, you'll be able to transfer the money from your Ally account. This is, I would say, one of the biggest area that I tend to see with people I work with in their 30s and their 40s, which is they love to travel, they love experiences, and the lumpy spending stops them from automating things, because things are so up and down in terms of where cash flow is. So it's difficult for them to automate their investment accounts or emergency fund, because they don't know what's going to happen here. So if you create that vacation bucket, one is you are making the process more streamlined, and you're also giving yourself the space and the energy, right? Like the permission to say, I can take this vacation because I've been saving for it throughout the year. Some people need that. And if you're honest with yourself about what you need, this is a great strategy. So going back to these two areas in terms of emergency fund. So, right, the goal is 15,000. Be realistic. You're not going to hit $15,000 in 1 year. And it is okay to spread it out. It is okay to have one goal alongside another goal and contribute at the same time. You don't have to put in that total amount before you can take a vacation or do anything else, right? That's a recipe for burnout along the way. It's about having that automated process. You hit that goal number and then you can stop contributing. That frees up cash flow along the way. And then let's just say, right, you decide, hey, I'm not making a lot of money right now. I hear about something like a Roth IRA. Social media says that's a good idea. So if you decide to open like a Roth IRA, for example, or any sort of investment account, then you can automate that, right? Have small contributions. I'm putting in $50 a month, but it can be $5 a month. And it can automatically go into the account. It's consistent. You don't think about it. It doesn't matter what is happening with the stock market. You are just auto contributing and being disciplined over time, because it's happening without you having to do anything. And that's the key to automation. The more you automate, the more time you have, and then you'll look back at your account, right? Whether your emergency fund or Roth IRA or vacation bucket or your brokerage account, and you'll see like, oh, wow, I've actually, like this works. This has been happening over time. The last piece I have people put in for generally is end of year extra spending. There are many times when you go into January and you're like, I spent so much more money than I thought I was going to. Let's just be real about what you're going to spend. Had your had your account, right? Knowing that you're going to spend more end of year, that's okay. You planned for it, right? And if we go down to this last portion here, I've left this here on purpose just to show you what it looks like. So line 24 is what you have left over at the end of every month, right? So some of these months are tight, right? This is pretty tight here. I did, right? Like there's wiggle room, for example, in that spending worksheet. Maybe that month you're eating out less. You're taking some more sandwiches from home because you see that things are tight along the way. And then December, you see, oh, I don't actually have enough for this. And then this number is going to be adjusted, right? Something has to be adjusted. But if you spend the 1,000, this is where credit card debt begins to happen. So I wanted to show you this to show you can automate along the way, but it also requires checking in and self-reflection, because if you can't pay off your credit card in full, it means that you can't pay for it. And the last thing I want to have you do during this time, right, on top of student loans, is to rack up consumer credit card debt that, right, sometimes is avoidable, sometimes it's not, but there are changes that you can make along the way. It doesn't have to be every month, but I would check in with this twice a year, right? Automate and make sure that it's working for you. And maybe you'll see that, oh, you actually, in your spending worksheet, you actually had more of a buffer than you realize, because on the clothing side, you stopped buying clothing for a while because you're living in scrubs. And that freed up some cash flow along the way. So one part, which as I wrap this up with cash flow, is this. This is everyone's least favorite exercise. It just flat out is. It's not fun to do, but it's not something you have to live in. It's spending 2 to 3 hours to set this up and automate the process, right? And that's setting up, for example, your Ally bucketing system, opening up the investment account. I have no affiliation with any of these providers. These are options that I really like. And for the bucket system, one last piece is it also pays right now about 4.3% interest on your cash. So if you have extra cash that is set aside for emergency, put that into an online savings account. Don't leave it in your checking account, right? Unless your checking account is earning at least 4% interest. So I'll stop there. I talked fast. I was trying to get all of this in. So thank you so much for your time.
That was great, Valerie. Thank you so much for putting that together. Managing cash flow is, it's stressful. It can feel like, I don't know, like, I think at times we can associate it with like our goodness or like how smart we are or anything. But during residency, it's an extremely difficult game to play. So I appreciate your information, as well as like your optimism and energy is very, very encouraging.
It can be fun.
Yeah. So now if any of you would like to ask Valerie further questions, she's going to go into the breakout room with her name on it, and you can move yourself over there to ask additional questions. Thanks again, Valerie. That was great.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
So now it's time for Steiny. Dr. Jeff Steiner is going to be presenting now. He's going to be discussing licensing. So for licensing for physicians in training, as well as employee benefits. Go ahead, Jeff.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for having me. Thank you all for taking the time out of your schedule to come hang out with us and talk about some nerdy stuff. So professional disclosure, I'm the founder and investment representative at Second Opinion Financial. I am a former physician turned financial planner. And so the only financial disclosure that I have, I've got 2 books, Physician Personal Finance Made Easy and Physician Life Management. So why me? Why are you going to trust me with this stuff? So I'm a former program director, spent 10 plus years in graduate medical education. We had 1,600 residents on campus, and I attended the ACGME for about 7 years. So I talked to a lot of other program directors, and what I'm going to present to you tonight is kind of some of the pitfalls that we can run into as you go through your training. Now, I'm not your program director, but I do have a very particular set of skills that I've acquired over a very long career. So what are we going to talk about tonight? We're going to talk about kind of laying the base work of understanding your life as a resident, getting started in residency, both the physician and training license and onboarding with your employer. And then we're also going to talk about maximizing your resident and employee benefits. So we're going to focus in on 3 of those. There's quite a bit there. A few of them have been mentioned tonight. I'm going to mention a few more and kind of hone in on some of those. So understanding your life as a resident. You're in med school. You're like, great, when I'm a resident, it's going to be great. I'm going to be in training. I'm going to learn my craft. And then you get there and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a resident, but I'm like also an employee. And so like, how does that whole system fit together? So as a resident, you have the ACGME, which is the accreditation body. They have institutional requirements. Then you have your program. It's got its own requirements. You have an institutional boss, which is a DIO. You have your program director, associate program directors. You have a program coordinator. And then on the other side, you also have the department. You're also part of a department. It has its own policies and procedures. And so some of these you're going to take out and use as you go along to maximize as you go. So as an employee, you're either an employee of the institution or the hospital where you're going. Now at UT Southwestern, we had 4 different employers on campus, which made it really interesting when talking with residents about employee benefits. And the employer also has legal documents. When you show up, you'll be signing a contract as a resident. As an attending physician, you absolutely want to negotiate your contract. As a resident physician, you don't have a lot of choice in negotiating that contract. But there are policies and procedures along with being an employee that you will be using. So let's talk about the practice of medicine. Like, how do you actually legally practice medicine? So what it involves is when you are practicing independently, you have a state-specific license and you have a DEA number. Now, when you're a resident and you apply to go into residency, you may have already gotten like notices from your residency about it, but you will apply for a physician in training license, or some places call it like a postgraduate training license. And this allows you to practice medicine under supervised practice of medicine. So the other thing they're going to have you do is sign up for your MPI. And what about the DEA number? Now it's interesting. You will use the institutional DEA number to be able to practice as a resident. And so when you kind of get these things together, realize that there'll be a lot of paperwork, and you'll want to contact your residency, and then also find out from your residency how to pay. Some residencies will pay for your physician in training license. Some won't. It just kind of depends. The other piece of applying for your license is this. You want to disclose everything, but don't over disclose. Now, what do I mean by that? On your application, you're going to have basic stuff like contact info, training and work history. And this is like after medical school. Some of you will have none in that section. You have a professional history, like if you've had licensing or certification in other places. For most of y'all, that won't be an issue. They'll ask about your medical education, your training, any kind of employment. Have you had any leave of absences? Fill all that out as accurately as possible. They'll also ask about malpractice history. And then the part that usually trips people up is this. They're going to ask you about disciplinary action, arrests, charges, convictions, these kind of things. And this is where I'm going to present a true story time. And that is a story of 2 bottles. One is this bottle, and the other one is a perfume bottle. So I had a resident that was with me in training that had been charged with inciting a riot. Long story, involved a hacky sack and some really cranky police officers. But he was charged with inciting a riot. He has to disclose that every time he goes up for his medical license. And the charges were dropped, but because he was charged with it, he disclosed it. He's never had an issue getting privileges, getting his license, anything. Let's talk about the perfume bottle. There was another resident. When she was 17, she got caught shoplifting a perfume bottle. The judge and the attorney said, don't worry, this will be expunged. No one will find it. She didn't disclose it on her forms. So when the medical, when she went to go get her medical license, they found out about this conviction. And so she had to go and do like 10 hours of ethics training and this kind of thing. The point is this. Here's a guy who was charged with inciting a riot, and he just discloses it, never an issue. This other one that didn't disclose it, it was an issue. So disclose it, just be honest about it, and most of the time you won't have an issue. The other thing that I'd like to caution you about is there'll be a section in there about mental and physical health. Answer the question as honestly as you can and make sure you don't over disclose. Meaning, years ago, there used to be a section in there about mental health. Have you ever been treated for mental issues, this kind of thing? The questioning on that form can be very tricky. If you went to go have therapy, you've seen a therapist, good, you should have. And if you're kind of having questions about how to fill that part out in the specific question, contact your program director so they can walk you through, so you don't put something on there that isn't true and isn't a true representation of what happened. Onboarding with your employer. So you're going to get a lot of emails. There's going to be a lot of paperwork to do, and it's going to have somewhat a tight time frame to get it back. Make sure you do those things so that you can stay on top of it, because you don't want to forego, or you don't want to, spend so much time that you miss starting on your residency on time. The other thing is this. I'm sure some of you see this and you see poison ivy. So true story time. There was a resident at an institution, went to Colorado, where it's legal to partake in marijuana. Apparently, they were around it. They didn't really partake in it, but they were around it, and he tested positive for a drug test when he showed up for work. Now, you could say, well, it's legal in Colorado. Look, no moral, judgment. That's what he chose to do. However, the policy states that when they show up, you'll have a drug test. So if the policy of the hospital or the institution says that that will be a negative drug screen, then it needs to be a negative drug screen. So just be aware of, the whole saying of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, not always. So just be aware of those things as you get ready to have some time off between med school and residency. So maximizing your benefits. You are going to get so much paperwork. You are not going to be excited like this guy. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, I got to choose like retirement and a health insurance and this kind of thing. And I think that we can narrow it down a little bit for you and look at those three things. So we'll look at retirement, we'll look at your ed fund, and we'll look at parental leave. So retirement savings, just real quick, basics on retirement savings. You have employer-sponsored plans, and then you have personal plans. And some residencies offer a 403B that offers a match. Others do not. Some residents, there's a lot of information out there about, residents have to get a Roth IRA. And it really depends on a number of things. But let's talk about a match. Like, what is a match? So a match is where when you put money into a retirement account, the employer puts money into a retirement account. Now, sounds like a great deal. The thing that, along with the match, that you need to look at is What is the vesting schedule? What does that mean? Vesting, the way I remember it, the way I remind people to remember it, is vesting means you take the money, you put it in your vest, you go home with it. So the vesting schedule may look something like this. For the first year that you put money in, you will be vested in the match of 20%. The next year will be 40%. Next year will be 60%. So all the money that goes into match, you may not be vested in. The money that you put in, you are vested in. So once you kind of figure out the match, you may be given the option between traditional and Roth. So let's just review those real quick. Both, we'll look at the 403B. Both, you put money into the account, it grows tax-free. Where you pay taxes depends on the account. For traditional, you pay taxes when the money comes out. For Roth, you pay taxes when the money goes in. So a lot of times the advice that is given to residents is put money in a Roth. You're at the lowest tax bracket that you'll ever be. And then that way you'll do really well. Now the challenge is this. Everyone is talking about the Roths and how great they are. But the challenge for some is if you're going for PSLF. And it might make sense for those residents who are going for PSLF to actually put money in a traditional retirement account. You'll have to run the numbers. Because when you put money in a traditional retirement account, it reduces your adjusted gross income on your taxes, which will also reduce how much money you pay on your school loans. And so the thing that I remind people about is when you're making retirement decisions, you're looking at the employer and or individual retirement agreement. You're looking at traditional and or Roth, and then you have to choose how it's invested. Now, the choosing how it's invested is very important. I spoke with an attending. They had spent 6 years putting money into a Roth IRA. I said, well, how is it invested? It was all in cash. So you've got to make sure that once it's in the account, Roth IRA is not an investment, it's a type of account. You have to make sure that the money is invested. Let's talk about your education fund. So this is money that is given to you by your department in order to help pay for some of your education. So what you'll want to find out is how much you get each year. Can it be carried over from year to year, or is it you use it or lose it? And what is the process to use the money? So for some education funds, if you want to buy books, you have to order it through the department. For others, you just buy it off Amazon and they'll reimburse you. You just have to figure that out. Now, the nice thing is, figure out how this money can be used, because you may use it for books, you may use it for board exams, or you could even, depending on the department, you might be able to use it for your full medical license before you graduate. So this is where some people kind of forget about the education fund. Some people just love to spend the money. Be a little conscious about how you're spending this, because it is tax-free money that you're able to use to help you with your education. So parental leave. When we talk about parental leave, the first thing that usually comes up is FMLA. So let's talk about that. FMLA is a federal law. And what I want you to do when you think of FMLA, you want to think of time, not money. Because what FMLA does is it just protects your job. It allows you and those employers that have more than 50 employees and they've worked there for 12 months, they can take 12 weeks of unpaid job protective leave per year. Now, great that you can have 12 weeks of FMLA. The challenge is, how am I going to get paid during that time? The nice thing is, in 2022, ACGME came out and made some pretty awesome changes in some of their documents, some of their policies. So in ACGME documents, just as an aside, there are 3 kind of words that they use. When they use may, it means it gives the department or the program permission to. Should is just a recommendation. Must is a mandate. You have to do it. So when we pull up the ACGME institutional requirements, If you dig into vacation and leave absence, this is a must policy, which means your department must allow you to do this. And that is, it provides residents and fellows with a minimum of 6 weeks of approved medical, parental, or caregiver leave away from training. So that's 6 weeks paid. Now, what you may say is, well, then my employer is just going to take my sick leave and my vacation, and I'm going to be left with nothing. It's interesting, though, is it also requires them to not, you still have to have an additional week of paid time off available to you. So if you take 6 weeks for parental leave, you still have another week of vacation that you can use later in the year. So if you are planning to start your family during residency, this is great for 6 weeks. But the other thing that you may want to kind of take a look at is short-term disability. Some short-term disability policies cover parental leave, usually reserved for maternal leave. And the thing to think about this is you can only sign up for this when you start residency or the open enrollment. So if you're planning to start a family, take a look at the short-term disability, find out if it covers parental leave, and find out when you need to sign up for it so you can get it covered. Now, the last thing that you'll hear from some people is if you take paternity leave, you're going to have to extend your training. Not so true. So back in the day, when you took parental leave, you had to extend your residency training by the amount of time that you took leave. So if you're out for 6 weeks, you had to extend it by 6 weeks. A lot of residency training programs have reversed this. They've said, if you're out on approved parental leave, you do not have to extend. Now, there may be, depends if you have multiple parental leaves during your residency, you may have to extend. Just kind of depends on the specialty training. So talk with your program director. If your program director says, you know what, you're going to have to extend your training, so be it. Take care of your family. Honestly, when we're looking at applicants, or when I was looking at applicants for attending jobs and they extended the residency, like, oh, why'd you extend? I was on parental leave. Okay, done. Not a big deal. It may push you off cycle for fellowship. Look, your training that you do is for a career that's going to last 20 to 30 years. Extending it by a little bit of time, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, isn't a big deal. But you may not even have to extend. So before you start getting concerned about extending training and all these kind of things, talk with your program director, figure it out, and then do what's best for you and your family. So what about some next steps? So what are we going to do? We covered a lot of ground. Be responsive to your residency program. Apply for your physician and training license, disclose, but don't overinterpret the questions. Onboarding policy and drug testing, just be aware of it. Figure out your retirement savings, figure out how to use your education fund, and then get the most out of your parental leave by utilizing ACGME policy and your employee benefits together. I'm always afraid, like I was on mute the whole time and no one told me.
Yeah, we're just watching you like laughing. No.
Good, good. You should.
No, that was great. Very, very comprehensive. I find the whole realm of employer benefits to be it's so much information, and like you never know like where you're gonna. Every institution's different as far as where this information is available and when it is. So really appreciate you taking the time to explain all that. So if any of you have further questions of Dr. Steiner, he's going to go into his breakout room at this point. You can take yourself over there and speak further. So thanks again, Jeff. Really appreciate your efforts.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
So our last presenter for today, can't believe we're already here, is Lei Deng. Thank you so much for joining us, Lei. So Lei is a financial planner and a friend, and she does excellent work in her field. And so I'm really glad that you're willing to share some things with us on this topic. The
Yeah,
benefits,
thank you.
the benefits of establishing these 4 money habits early on in your career. So take it away.
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So I was very excited to actually get this topic. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And I know this is the last session and you guys have been here for a while. So don't worry, there is no math in this session. So since we're talking about money habits, so there is some frou-frou. So I apologize in advance for that. But I do find it that financial planning doesn't never live in a vacuum. It works for people that live real lives. You know, it should be how should I say, grounded. So financial habits, I think it's a really great way to capture these. And if you have read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, he talked about how, from my seat of financial planner, it's almost like investing. You have the dividends, you have the investing, interest compounding over time. And it doesn't seem like much on a daily basis, but through, the magic of time, you will find, after a period of time that you've come a long way. The same principle applies to these money habits too. So I hope, it will be helpful to you guys to talk about these 4. So let's go through a little agenda. I try to keep things very simple so we don't have too much stuff. We can just focus on the main course today on the money habits. So we'll go through some introduction, and actually wanted to quote some survey and some quotes from physicians themselves on money. I thought it was very interesting, and we'll go through the money habits and recap before we go. So we have this awesome seminar that Tyler has worked very, very diligently. I can't believe, how much content we have. So props to Tyler to put this together. I bet it's months and months of work to put this together. So, for everything else on the more strategic stuff, on the more technical stuff, more tactical stuff, we have sessions to cover that. We're not talking about Roth IRA today. We have people covering that. We are not talking about disability insurance today. We have people covering that already. So I really wanted to focus today's session and really talk about just the money habits. And I found this survey. I thought it was wonderful. So I have 2 pages here. And the fonts might be a little bit small, but I do have the link at the bottom. If you do get the presentation afterwards, please feel free to read through it at your own leisure. This is from the 2021 ACP report on physicians' financial preparedness. These are, I would probably say a lot of those things word by word, but I feel like it's probably better to hear it from physicians themselves than from me. I think it probably has a stronger effect. So this page is organized as early career physicians, mid-career physician, and late career physicians. And you don't have to read through all of this right now, but I just wanted to point out some of the common themes that I'm seeing. So for early career physicians, as you guys will be soon, a lot of that is on education, being informed, minored in business college. You don't need to, but the desire of, for knowledge is there. Mid-career physician talk a lot more about, more tactical stuff, a disability insurance. And I love that we start to get answers on managing finance with your spouses, which is such an important topic that a lot of times that we don't really talk about. And for late career physicians, a lot of that is really, we're going back to the basics. We talked about budget, we talked about spending plan. No matter how we change the wording, how we word it, it's the same thing. It's to live within your means. That's essentially what it is. And there are tons of quotes about that. Don't keep up with the Joneses. Pay attention to lifestyle creep. Don't be house poor. It's really important. Sometimes the most simple thing is the most effective thing. So that's definitely one thing to keep in mind. So I thought these quotes are so wonderful and so relevant and very validating for me too, because almost all of them correspond to one of those money habits that we'll talk about later. So just one more page of some quotes. I think, you guys at, this stage of your life, you probably can picture you guys yourselves as residents much better than, an late career physician that's about to retire. So what the physicians have said is, residents have said are pretty similar. A lot of that, similar to early career physicians, a lot of that is on knowledge, but it's also a lot of tactical things like negotiate a better salary, don't borrow as much loan money. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I know we have another session. I think it's Courtney Ranstrom's session to talk about selecting financial planners. So definitely pay attention to that. And lastly, I do want to share some quotes from this quote unquote successful physicians. And success is defined as who are ahead of schedule for retirement here. My favorite quotes from all of this is the first one here. Living a full life is not about how much money you can spend. Some of you might go, obviously the more money, the better. I don't disagree. Money is very important, but I do love this quote because I do think it's a quote from someone that's lived, that's gone through ups and downs in life, that has experience. So I think it's a very powerful quote. But yeah, a lot of the other things are definitely focused on, managing finance with your spouse, having wants and needs, which is about managing spending again. So I wanted to share this all with you before we go into the money habits. Hopefully some of these quotes can stick with you, and we will categorize them and see how each of them slot into the different money habits. So you probably have heard a lot of these money habits. I don't think it's anything that anyone hasn't heard of, honestly, but we'll focus on not just knowing what they are, but also how to develop this habit, how to develop a strategy for you to implement it into your daily lives. For example, the first one will be develop awareness, and the second one will be mindful spending. The third one, I added later because I think it's really a product of, the age of the internet. The last one is about communicate about money with your partner, which is similar to managing finance with your partner. So you can probably take out the word money or finance from all of these, and these will be really great to just general life advice. But all changes start with awareness. Financial planning in its essence is really just a 3-step thing. The first step is knowing where you are. The second step is knowing where you want to go. These are your financial goals, and you can plan, the path towards it. And that is your plan of how to get there. So, develop awareness is really important, and I will save some time here and go through this a little bit more quickly because Valerie has done such a fantastic job going through how to create a spending plan already. In addition to what she said, I think what I want to bring up is also the employee benefits that we've talked about. Just make sure you go through the employee benefits, understand the matching, understand the 403B matching, 401k matching, the free money, right? And understand these leave, policies, because it could be very, very beneficial to you. That's in addition to your salary. And when you get your paycheck, I would suggest to read your paycheck as well, to just understand how you go from what you have in your bank account, go from your net gross pay to what you have in the bank account. How much tax is withheld? How much 401k or 403b contribution did you make? What is the matching? How much health insurance did you have to pay? All of this stuff for you to really understand how the money is flowing. Just be aware. And the second part is your expense. And, we also covered this pretty extensively earlier in Valerie's session. Understand fixed, variable, monthly, non-monthly. I won't dwell too much over here. There are great free tools that are covered in previous sessions as well. And there are paid tools out there as well. I heard people raving about YNAB, for YNAB fans out there. I can never get into it, but I know for people that love YNAB, they love YNAB. But there's also, Rocket Money, Copilot. There are a lot of different tools. I don't endorse any of them. Just wanted to point out what's out there. So the second step is mindful spending. And I think mindful spending really is the general umbrella that covers a lot of different different sections. So first of all is living with your means. This is definitely intertwined with everything else that we've talked about before to, to have the awareness. What is living with your means? Well, first of all, you need to know what your means is to know how to live within it, right? Like we are going back to budget all over again. Second is really what I want to focus more time today to in the mindful spending part on is to separate value from price. And price is a standardized way to show a worthiness of goods and services, and price is the same pretty much, in a general sense to everyone. But value is not. We're all different. There are times, I'm a huge foodie and I love food. My food budget would, scare a lot of people, but that's generally how I enjoy life. That make it sounds bad, but that make life worth living for me. So I do love spending money on food. So money spent on food is worthwhile for me. And I have friends, that love spending money on, on clothes and fashion more. And there's no wrong or right answer. It's just different values. So if she goes shopping for me and then I come back, seeing how she spent money and I wouldn't, if that applies to me, I wouldn't be very happy, and vice versa. She wouldn't be very happy if I just buy a bunch of food for her. So we all have our preferences, and that is okay. So the earlier we can learn to separate the value from the price and actually identify the things that you enjoy doing more, and the better it is. And that sounds so easy. That sounds like, oh gosh, I just do it, right? But in reality, it's a lot harder to actually be able to know what the value is to you. You have to really go through a lot of introspection. I would suggest just go and, if you're in your apartment, look around and see what are the things that you genuinely enjoy and what are the things that you feel like it's kind of like, it's like a good toy. And then I just, tossed it away after 3 uses. Just slowly be able to build up more awareness into your own spending habits, into your own preferences. And I think through time, that will help you to be more and more happy with what you have. And you can have the same paycheck, but hopefully being able to identify your value will help you to be able to get more out of your paycheck. And the third one and the fourth one, and I think, avoid lifestyle creep and don't compete with the Joneses. Let the Joneses win. And I think these things are also very easy said than done. Just trying to put myself in your guys' shoes, fast forward 5 years when you guys are attending and you guys work so hard. You go through so much on a day-to-day basis. You're, in my opinion, not properly compensated for your labor. And when you get the paid attending check, I guess it's so easy just to say, oh my gosh, I, slaved away myself, for so long. And now I'm finally getting my, grown up paycheck and my attending paycheck. I'm just going to spend to compensate for my lost years. It's so easy to do that, right? But if you do have a good sense of your own value of what you love, I think it's much easier for you to be able to say, I don't need a bigger house. I'm very happy. This is the optimal amount of a house that is for me, and I do not need to go over it. I do not need to have a bigger mortgage. It doesn't do anything for me. I would much rather spend the money on vacation, for example. By acknowledging and knowing what you want, then it would be actually very easy for you to resist urges, competitions and all of this stuff, comparing with other people. And like we talked about, it's very understandable if you do decide, hey, I want to spend some money because I work so hard. I really just want to compensate myself and treat myself. Absolutely valid. Absolutely valid. You should do that. But if you do that, the last point is try to not rush into long-term fixed expensive commitments. It's one thing if you say, I want to treat myself to a Chanel handbag. And it's another thing you say, I want to treat myself to a $10 million home. One is something that you can recover in 2 months. The next is something that you're going to tie into for 30 years. And with maintenance costs on top of that, replacing the roof and all of the stuff, it's a much different financial decision. In general, the bigger the decision, the bigger the money is, the bigger the dollar amount is, the longer the commitment is. Just to try to be more deliberate before you rush into them. long-term fixed commitments. And I think, especially echoing with something that Valerie said earlier of the, you know, of the shoulds, you know, you should have a house by the time you are 40. Not necessarily, you know, don't listen to the shoulds, just consider your own situation and see if that's the right decision for you. The third one is learn to tell good financial advice from bad ones. And, you know, obviously you guys already have a leg up because you're here at the seminar. I'm half kidding, but I do love all of the panelists. I think they do great work and have really great advice. But we live in the age of the internet, and there are just no shortage of information out there. We live in the age of social media and, you know, the eyeball economy, right? It's all about what can I get people to pay attention and focus on. There are two things that are bad about it. One is in order to get your attention, sometimes they have to be extreme, and extreme advices are rarely good advice. The second thing is in order to, like, our, you know, dopamine hits, we need it like every day, just like, you know, over and over and over again. And so it needs to be short, and short does not go well with nuances. And a lot of financial advice, same as medical advice, has nuances. So it's just not a good media to carry in-depth financial advice. So if you probably encounter a lot of financial advice or financial education that's out there, and there are parts that might be conflicting with each other. There are things that are outdated because the laws change all the time. So how can you tell in this, you know, vast ocean of seemingly everybody kind of sort of knows what they're saying, and how do I know what they're saying is right or not? And how do I know if, you know, especially it can be right but not fit for me? So how can you tell? I think the most important thing, the biggest indicator to me, is the incentive. What are their incentives? How do they make their money? Do they make their money by, you know, trying to get as many followers as they want, trying to get more eyeball their content? So they need to be outrageous, they need to be short, and they need to be not nuanced. And so they can get a bigger affiliated marketing check or a brand deal check or whatnot. Or are they, you know, trying to tell you 401k is fraud? It's not, because they want to put all of the money into an insurance product because that's how they make commissions. Trying to understand their incentives, and that will help you a lot into understanding their biases, and therefore understanding how they're wording the things, what are they omitting, what are they not telling you. The second thing is, we already alluded to this a little bit, is strong negative emotion and sound advice don't really go hand in hand. If somebody says something make you feel really ashamed, make you feel the urge that you have to act on, make you feel greedy, make you feel like if you miss on this, you know, you're never going to, you know, getting on the ride of, you know, like a Dogecoin to the moon or something like that. If people say something that give you really strong negative emotion, that's generally not a sound advice, in my opinion. The third one is one size never fits all. This is less nefarious, but I think it's still, like we talked about, everybody has their own situations. You know, something that worked for your uncle like 40, 50 years ago does not necessarily work for you. And especially just the example of what we've talked about in Roth IRA. When you are in the lower income years, it's generally a good idea to have Roth IRA, but our previous session have talked about why that might not be a good idea. So that's a classic example of one size never fits all. And now we move on to what's indication of good advice. And I think transparency is great. If they tell you how they're paid ahead of time, if they tell you what their biases might be, if they tell you the pros, but also the cons ahead of time, I think these are indications that this could be a good advice. And lastly, I want to say, though, also apply these standards to your heroes. There are people that on the internet that might seem very, very authoritative, and you might think that everything that comes out of their mouth is gold. It's not. We're all humans, right? We all have our biases. Just remember to apply these standards to your heroes. And your hero could be also just an expert in one area, but not necessarily the other. You know, as we know, nephrologist might not be, you know, would not be the best cardiologist, right? And vice versa. So similar things, we have our own lanes. Sometimes it's better to not mix them up. So lastly is to communicate money with your partner. We've seen a lot of, the quotes about this as well. My favorite way to communicate about money is having a money date. And, during the money date, you can set common goals with each other. And I think why money date is better, but that doesn't replace the everyday smaller conversation about money, how much we're spending on food, etc. But I think money date is great because you take you out of your ordinary environment, and then it lets you focus on each other and have a deeper, more meaningful conversation with each other. So you can focus on the more, talking about the future, setting the common goals. And also remember, we all grow up in different environments, so we all have our differences. So being able to understand where your partner is coming from, withhold judgment, try to understand, withhold judgment, and seek middle ground is really, really important. And like a lot of these quotes that I've talked about, I was joking with one of my clients, and she was talking about how they splurge on their date nights. And I was like, well, date nights are a lot less expensive than divorces. We just had a good laugh about it, and there's half truth in that, right? But yeah, it's not just purely a monetary decision, but also helps you just to build a deeper connection with each other. So these are the 4 money habits. I know we have to go through them relatively quickly. If you have any questions, I will be in the breakout room. But before we go, I know we talked about these habits. They seem like a generic, just life wisdoms. So I know in practice, changes take longer than just something, like if that's the case, we don't need therapy. We just know, and we'll do it. Changes do take time. So be patient with yourself. And, also in the spirit of habit stacking, if you want to incorporate these habits, I will recommend to do them one by one. Just have one and slowly let it become your daily routine, and that way it feels more effortless before you go to the next one. If you try to take on too much at one time, sometimes it tend to fizzle out. So I would rather much rather you do one thing and then be able to incorporate it than try to take on everything and not be able to do any one of them. So this is my contact information. Like I said, I'll be in the breakout room. So yeah, please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Lei. That was really enjoyable to hear you explain some good money habits to establish early on. I mean, anything like money or otherwise habits, they just
Right.
whatever we start with early on, it's a lot easier to maintain the good ones that that we establish early on. So
yeah, I do. I used to work some like more retiree couples, and the general sense is we are working with constraints, and these are the things that we're working within. Like if you have that much asset, I'm not a magician, I can work magic for you. So working with the younger people really rejuvenates me because there's so much more we can do in the future. So yeah, I think it's a great topic.
yeah. So if any of you would like to ask Lei specific questions, she's going to go to her breakout room now, and you can move yourself over there. So thanks again, Lei. Appreciate it. Now, for the final 15 minutes, we wanted to open this up for general questions and answers. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. So if you do have a question, just raise your hand and we'll unmute you. I did want to just briefly, so if you raise your hand and then we'll start going through it, but I just wanted to share one thing with you, and that is to show you our plan for tomorrow. So if you see here, you can see that our lineup of speakers, we have 6 specific topics regarding financial advisors, laying a good foundation for retirement planning, addressing major financial mistakes that many in training have made, and like how to learn from others' experience, investing, how to begin investing, how to protect yourself from the financial industry. I'm particularly looking forward to Dr. Patel discussing that. And then I'm going to talk specifically about buying a home versus renting. Many people ask this question, and so I thought it would be important to discuss that. So that's for tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Now, that aside, Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask me? I know that Andrew is still here, and I think Jeff is here, and any of the panelists, you're welcome to turn your video on if you wish, or you don't have to. If you have any questions, just raise your hand and we'll discuss. So let's see. It looks like we might have had one new question here. Oh yeah, thanks, Tori. So yeah, the Excel sheet, we are going to make that available. We need to well, I've asked Valerie if she could send that to me. So it will be in the resources tab probably by tomorrow. So if you're, hopefully you'll be able to attend tomorrow night as well. That'll be something that you can access and download and use for yourself. So that's one thing. Jeff, I was going to ask you something while we wait to see if anyone asks any questions.
Does it involve a meme? Because I got them. I brought the memes.
Yeah. What has been your most effective meme to motivate people to make decisions?
Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to pull it up. I'll find it while they
That's okay. Don't worry.
because the visual is just so good. I'll look it up.
Yeah, go
We
ahead.
have a new
Looks like-
question. It's called will being part, or they asked, will being part of an HCA residency exclude them from qualifying for PSLF?
It will delay it. So because HCA is a for-profit organization, your years in training will not count toward public service loan forgiveness. So it does not, it doesn't mean that you couldn't go for public service loan forgiveness, but it does mean that the far majority of your qualifying payments would be based on your post-training, or I should say post-HCA years. So if you continue on in fellowship somewhere else that's a nonprofit, then your PSLF payments could start there when you're making 65, 75,000 or whatever it is. But it's the PSLF potential for forgiveness is drastically reduced. So
PowerPoint questions and these recordings. So I have linked a resource. On the resource tabs, there's a link to the Advice Residency YouTube. There you will find our recordings at the end of each day uploaded there. The PowerPoint, especially Andrew Paulson's, which someone specified, he will be sending us his PowerPoint and that will be uploaded in the same resources tab.
So yeah, Michael, that's a great question about e-filing. So we could re-emphasize what's happening is like you graduate from medical school. Your school actually says, yeah, you've graduated. It's been officially registered that you're not in school. Then you can do your federal student loan consolidation application in late May or early June, or if you choose to just not do that and pick your income-driven repayment plan later in the fall. In either case, the application requires linking your income, and studentaid.gov really, really wants you to link to your IRS data. Now, that's a whole nother discussion about like the strategy of doing that, but it seems like more and more that that's an unavoidable thing. If you have no income or low income for 2023, it's really beneficial to file a tax return. Now, sometimes people have said like, oh, my accountant said that I can't do it. And so I just didn't file, or like they said I can't e-file, so I sent in a paper copy. They just don't understand what you're trying to accomplish. You can absolutely e-file with no income. Now there might be some software processes that mitigate this. Like TurboTax might like say like, well, you don't have any income, so you don't have to e-file. If that happens to you, whether it's that or Free Tax USA or whatever, go into the interest income section of the software and put in $1. Normally this is attributed to bank interest, like you have Ally savings account or your bank or whatever, and it's like, oh, you got like $12 in interest and you get what's called a 1099 INT. Normally it would populate there. You don't have that though. So what you do is you put $1 and then it's going to ask you, well, who paid you? You need to pick a person in your life who you could theoretically have loaned money to, and they had to pay you interest in the form of $1. So that's it. I know it sounds like it's like something's wrong with that, but I promise you it is not illegal in any way. Especially like to say, tell the IRS that you made more money than you actually did. There's no issue with that. It's just a way to kind of get over that hump. So file a tax return electronically. If you do that, then when you do that application, the consolidation application, or just the simple income-driven repayment plan application later in the fall, you can link your 2023 tax return to that application, and then they'll say, oh, look, you made nothing. Your payment will be $0 until your next income recertification date. Any add-on, Andrew?
Yeah, it's a key point. So make sure you get your taxes done this year, right? And then when you consolidate this year, you can use the 2023 income when you probably didn't make anything. So
yeah. Someone else had a question here about, I think, investments. Who is that? What are your thoughts on keeping prior investments versus cashing them into decreased loans needed while transitioning into residency? So, I mean, I guess part of it depends on part of the answer to that question is if you have profits from those investments, you may have a degree of taxation by selling it this year. So you have to keep that in mind. But on the other hand, selling investments versus taking on loans, I guess it depends on the interest rate of the loans. But if it's a new loan, I venture to say you're not going to get anything less than 7% on a new loan that's not tied to like, well, I mean, even like homes, like the interest rate's just 7%. So you're probably talking about more like 9 or 10 plus. So investment growth in the face of paying debt that has interest accrual of that magnitude, 9, 10, 12, 15, 20%, your investments will not stand a chance. So I typically will take a hard look at selling investments if you have no cash and your only other option is to take on high interest debt to be able to fund this transition. Let's see. When should we start worrying about filing income tax returns if we haven't done them yet before? If you have never filed an income tax return, and you have federal student loans, you should do it for 2023. My go-to is Free Tax USA because TurboTax is just so full of like ads and trying to get you to buy add-on services. It's really annoying. So Free Tax USA is great. And if you have no income, it should be free where you don't have to pay for the electronically filing process, but just follow that step of like, try to enter $0 if you made no money. Now, if you made a little money, enter that. And if it's less than, for a single person, isn't less than $32,000, the payments will be $0 for the next cycle.
correct.
Yeah. So let's see. Oh, John, my school advisors say we're able to return student loans until we graduate. So I'd be using the stock money. Oh, I see. So it's like Grad Plus or something like that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess part of it is like you got to do an analysis of the stock investments themselves, which is well beyond what we could discuss today. I don't know. Like, yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Maybe I can chime in. I talked to Dr. Hiller a little bit earlier too. If your strategy is just to pay these off aggressively, don't take out more than you need, right? At that point in time, you just take out the minimum you need, right? So then you don't have to be worrying about these, getting 6% here in the market because those private student loan, I mean, those plus loans, they're 8% right now, right? You don't want to have an 8% loan if you're just going to end up paying that off, right? Like the only reason to be taking these out is if number one, you need it. And then number two, if you were going to do forgiveness, but I think yours is it's a pretty low likelihood. So if you took out more than you needed and you can give some of that back, I'd probably do that as long as you have enough set aside to, get moved and get your, your last month, first month rent, paid up front. So.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Let's see. Any other questions? Oh, thanks, Jeff, for typing in some answers. That's helpful. Let's see. I think we're getting close to. Yeah, and the recordings will be available later. I'll upload them to my YouTube channel. Oh, did you find the meme? Is that what you're about to show us, Jeff?
I don't want to interrupt if there are other questions coming in because
Let's see. Yeah, there's a couple others here. Let's see.
Okay.
What the process of filing an extension for taxes next year. Yeah. So, let's see. Yeah. So, John, Dr. Hiller, if you have my Twitter handle, some of this looks like it's a little bit more nuanced. Send me a message if you want to talk further. Just if you send me a DM. So, and we are hitting our 10 o'clock mark. So actually, yeah, let's we're gonna stop with the Q&A now. And Jeff, did you have something to share? And then we're gonna
oh yeah, favorite meme. Andrew will appreciate this one. So I say many residents treat their student loans bird box style. They just put on the blindfold and they row. And I said, so this is where we interact, like pay attention to what you're doing, come up with a plan. Don't just put it into forbearance. There's some really awesome things you can do with your student loans. And what you don't want to do is don't talk to your attendings because a lot of them just won't get it. So those are kind of my favorite thought-provoking memes.
I like that.
So
All right.
good.
All right. Well, we'll say goodnight now. We could talk about this forever, but we're doing this again tomorrow night, so we need to get some rest. And we hope that you're all able to rest. Thank you for coming tonight. The session begins same time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Courtney Ranstrom, a financial planner, Dr. Darko, Dr. Fry won't be able to give his part. I'm going to be giving that discussion. Dr. Spath, Dr. Patel, and then me again. We'll be talking about a variety of topics. So join us tomorrow night. Thank you for coming and have a good evening.